Hello, my name is AJ Goldsby. I'm a life master from Pensacola, Florida, and I'm coming today to bring you another one of my series of videos on the greatest games of chess ever played. This is a game played between Mikhail Tal, or Mihail Tal, as some people say, and Robert James Fischer, or Bobby Fischer, and it was played in the candidates tournament in Bled Zagreb, Belgrade, in the former country of Yugoslavia in 1959. I consider it to be positively, absolutely one of Tal's very best games, and obviously his opponent was Fischer, and it's just a brilliant, brilliant game, and I think it's often overlooked by a lot of other authors. I think in terms of strength of play and consistency of ideas, and also holding up to computer analysis, there are a few games from that time period, in my eyes, that look as pretty and look as solid and as consistent and just simply absolutely singularly beautiful as this game does. I mean, this game is just incredible in its consistency and its energy, and it holds up very well in an analysis today. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into our analysis of this game. Tal plays d4, knight f6, c4, g6, 3 knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6. This is, of course, the King's Indian, which was Fischer's favorite defense. Later on, he was and he used things like the Grunfeld and the Nimzo Indian when he thought he could see, maybe the Samish attack, especially against Spassky. He generally would revert to the Grunfeld because I think he did not want to face the Samish. But early in his career, Fischer had unerring faith in his King's Indian, and one of the books that I have, it's a very comprehensive book on the King's Indian that was published by I believe it was RHB, but anyway, it was published in the early 1970s. I believe Barden, Keene, and one other author. They were the authors. It was 3 authors that authored that book. Very comprehensive book, maybe one of the best books ever written on the King's Indian. It was in descriptive notation, and in that book, in the preface, they give a classic game by Bobby Fischer versus Korchnoi, and they call it basically an almost perfect King's Indian win. And it's Fischer as black versus Korchnoi from the World Blitz Championship in 1970. But anyway, so Fischer knew quite a lot about the King's Indian, and he was to use it throughout his career. Early in his career, I believe he used the King's Indian almost consistently, and that might have been one of his weak points. Like I said, later on, he was to vary and use more different types of openings. As black, he would use the exchange variation. He would use, lines of the Queen's Gambit. He would use, the Nimzo Indian, etc. And he didn't always play the King's Indian. But early in his career, he was pretty much consistent and generally played the King's Indian as black. White just develops naturally. Bishop e2, castles, knight f3, e5. Now, if black plays knight, well, let's just look at that real quick. If white castles and black plays knight c6, d5, knight e7, we have the Mar del Plata system. It's so named because this system was first featured at a big international tournament in South America in Mar del Plata. It's a big resort town. I believe it's in Argentina. But anyway, it was first featured at that tournament. And some of the early developers of the King's Indian were players like Gligoric, and of course Bobby Fischer. And also Geller too. Botvinnik was to later say, before Geller, we did not understand the King's Indian. And also Bronstein, he played quite a few games in the early development of that opening. But anyway, this is the Mar del Plata system, which is a completely different system than the one we have in this game. In this game here, we have D5, and this is the Petrosian system. This is a system that was developed by the compatriot and contemporary of Tal's, which was Tigran Petrosian, or I can't even say his name the correct way, but that's the way most Americans say his name. And he was world champion from 1963 to 1969. And here Fischer just continues to develop. Knight bd7, bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, a6. This move was kind of criticized later on. A lot of authors said it was premature and a waste of tempo. But a lot of times, if the black queen wants to get mobile, white can later play knight b5 and just pick off a pawn on c7, especially if the queens come off. So when I play the King's Indian or these kind of formations, I generally like to throw in a6 myself, maybe because I learned from studying Bobby Fischer's games. White castles, queen e8, knight d2, knight h7. Now this maneuver here is pretty much forced for black. Black is trying to get in the pawn break, f7, f5, and without this lever and pawn break, basically black will just slowly be constricted to death. In fact, that's one of this just slowly taking away all of black's squares and robbing him of counterplay is one of the main ideas of the Petrosian system. Now white plays b4. That's a very standard idea there. Basically, Tarrasch and later in the book Pawn Structure Chess, both authors agreed that you always play on the side of the board where you have more space. And here white has his pawn wedge on d5, so he generally plays on this side of the chessboard, on the queen side. Therefore, if white's going to be playing on the queen side, then black has to play on the king side. And again, the standard lever for black is to play f5 and maybe try a pawn storm or open lines and that type of thing on the king side. So anyway, white plays b4. Now black plays bishop f6. This was a brand new move, a theoretical novelty at the time that this game was played. And basically, Fischer's idea is to trade off his king bishop because it's his bad bishop. Tall's happy to do so because it weakens the squares around black's king, and that's a signal for Tall to start a kingside attack. Bishop takes f6, knight takes f6, knight b3, queen e7, queen d2, king h7. Maybe the black king should have gone to g7. That strikes me as being a slightly better square. I don't see white opening the g file, at least not anytime soon. But the way the game turned out, maybe the king would have been better off on g7 than on h7. Queen e3, knight g8, white plays c5. That's a very energetic move by Tal, and it actually required a great deal of calculation. White is also preparing to sacrifice. And I remember it was one of his trainers, maybe Aranon, who talked about how other masters in these type of positions would play the move c4, c5, and this was simply the beginning of opening a couple of lines and try to get a lot of active counterplay on the queen side, really invade and destroy. That's one of the basic ideas of white's play in the Queen's Indian in this particular line. Whereas with Tal, this idea c5 is the beginning of a combination. That's just the way the great Mikhail Tal played chess. Black plays f5. He's trying to get in his counterplay. White played e takes f5, g takes f5, f4. Now here I believe that black should have played e5, e4. I think computer analysis will show that to be one of the better moves. I think that Fischer opened up the game here, and that exposes this pawn here as being an isolani and a big weakness. And also, too, this bishop very quickly comes to this diagonal and begins attacking on this diagonal, and the white king begins feeling the heat of this particular move. So I think now, white's going to get a slight upper hand. D takes c5. Of course, the black's winning a pawn. That's all black sees as he wins a pawn. Simply bishop d3. Tal continues to play in a very sacrificial line here. B takes c4. C takes b4 rather. c5 takes b4. Rae1. Now we can see basically the idea of Tal's concept. He's sacrificed two pawns, but yet he's gotten all of his pieces working well together and on open lines. And a lot of his pieces, especially these units here, both rooks, this knight, this bishop, and the queen, are basically all pointed in the general direction of the black king. So defining a defense here is not easy at all for black. Fischer plays queen f6. That's a very natural move. Obviously he couldn't play queen c5 check here because simply knight takes queen. And queen to d6 is not possible owing to bishop takes f5 check. So I guess basically queen f6 was more or less forced here. And now Tal comes up with a very brilliant move. Rook e6 double exclam. It looks like a blunder, because it's just dropping the knight on c3. But, Tal knows exactly what he's doing. Queen takes c3. Bishop takes f5 check. Of course, if the black king goes back, simply rook takes pawn check and queen takes queen takes knight will lead to a winning attack. So here black is forced to give back material. He gives back the exchange. Rook takes f5, queen takes f5 check, king h8, rook f3. And now the threat is very simple. White's threatening ideas like rook here, rook to g3, rook takes knight check, and then rook e8. And black has a very severe problem. All of his pieces are completely bottled up, and he can't hardly move anything. And he's got to be very, very careful there about prematurely moving one of these pieces. So anyway, here black plays queen b2. White is two pieces down. 2 pieces and a pawn down here. So this is an extremely difficult position. You could probably analyze this all day. I already have. I have a web page where I have deeply analyzed this position and this entire game on my website. You can find it at www.ajschess.com/LifeMasterAJ. And just look for the block on the index page where I talk about the 10 best games ever played. And there's a link there to that page, and there's links to all the succeeding pages where I analyze each game in great detail. But anyway, here Fischer played Queen B2. And I asked one of my students here what he would do here as white. He said resign. I mean, he couldn't really see how white was going to continue his attack. Rook E8, that's a very good move. Pins this knight on the first row, and now white has very simple ideas like just simply Rook G3 and Rook takes knight, winning. And of course, now if knight F6, simply Queen takes knight check, because this knight here on G8 is pinned. He plays knight FD6. He does exactly that. Some of the alternatives are quite pretty, and if you look at the I think it's the Nunn book, the book that has John Nunn and Graham Burgess and one other English author, they look at this game in great detail and analyze all the different ways here that black can go wrong. I think black's pretty much forced at this point to give back material. So knight df6, queen takes f6, queen takes f6, rook takes f6, king g7, and now we get rook rff8. And here the main idea is that this bishop over here, and everything was frozen for basically for black. Black can't, he's head material. He has a very minor material advantage, but he can't move anything. And I think his extra pawns and his pieces are all just on bad squares. In fact, white's last move almost completely immobilized black. So black is basically forced to just shifting wood. Knight e7, knight a5, exclam, h5, h4, exclam. Again, Tal is just keeping all the squares closed, keeping Bobby from gaining too much space, and he's actually creating a mating web around the white king. And you'll see here in just a couple of moves, it gets very pretty. Rook b8, knight c4, b5, and now knight e5. This is where the knight was headed all along, and maybe this point was lost on Fischer. Now white threatens rook f7 check, winning the black knight, and even worse yet, rook f7 check followed by this rook on e8 to h8, which will lead to a checkmate. And the only way to stop that is to play giveaway. In other words, play a move like bishop e6 or bishop f5, and and Fischer can just take all the pieces that he wants. And here at this point, Bobby Fischer, he saw no way to continue, and he decided to throw in the towel. Again, I've already analyzed this game. I have 2 games, a replay page and just a text page with deep analysis on this game, and I'll post that link in the box just below the video where it says show more when I post this on the YouTube website. But anyway, that pretty much concludes my analysis of this game. Like I said, Fischer here resigned because he's either going to get mated or have to give back quite a bit of material. Fritz shows white to be winning in this position by over 10 to 15 points. It's jumping around quite a bit, but it's very clearly a win here for white. I hope you enjoyed my video. I hope you enjoy all my videos and my web pages. You don't have to, but if you would like to and would like to support my video making of videos and also my building my web pages, if you'd like to support that effort, please go to the PayPal website. That's www.paypal.com, and you can leave a donation there just by using my email, which is lifemasteraj@yahoo.com. Thank you for watching my video, and I hope you have a great day.